It started the way these things always do. Smiles rehearsed in green rooms, cameras quietly humming, producers half whispering directions like spells designed to keep things on track. The ITV studios had that peculiar buzz they get just before airtime, organized chaos cloaked in professionalism. Before we dive in, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. Interns hurried past with clipboards and battery packs. Someone adjusted a boom mic that wasn't quite sitting right, and in the makeup bay, a woman applied translucent powder like it could erase nerves. The green room, meanwhile, felt insulated but tense, like the eye of a storm. A producer leaned in close to a colleague and said, "It's all routine," in a tone that meant the opposite. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this wasn't just any guest. The stakes today were different. He arrived with minimal fanfare, but maximum awareness. Two aides flanked him, a publicist trailed behind like a second shadow, and his actual shadow, a silent security figure, stood just far enough back to be polite, but not a step further. Prince Harry, tailored blazer, a tie so bland it seemed surgically selected to avoid controversy, and that trademark half smile, one that invited approach but offered no real access. He shook hands, stagehands, floor manager, a lighting tech who offered him still water, and walked the hallway towards set with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from knowing you've walked this walk 100 times before and survived every one of them. Inside the studio, the familiar table awaited. 4 chairs, each occupied by a host who knew exactly how to hold a conversation like a weapon, carefully smiling until it was time to use the edge. Christine Lampard, polished as always, handled introductions. Beside her, Nadia, quick with warmth and empathy. Kay Adams sat poised, pen already uncapped, the page in front of her blank but expectant. And then Denise Welch, spine straight, hands folded, alert, listening, not playing. They exchanged a few quiet glances. A silent agreement passed between them. Stay fair, stay clear, stay ready. The intro music queued up, light and airy like the weather forecast. Applause followed, predictable but still effective. Christine turned to camera with a practiced smile and said, "Our guest today needs little introduction. Please welcome the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry." He nodded, smile fixed, voice even. "Thanks for having me. Happy to be here." And it all began. Smooth, easy, rhythmic, the dance of the daytime interview. Start soft, build rapport. Christine walked him through the usual talking points. A charity project he'd been supporting. A feel-good story about a veteran he'd met. Nothing too sharp. The audience leaned in, relaxed. He handled the questions well. He'd done this before. Measured responses, even a few well-timed jokes. Cameras caught his good side. The overhead crane swept past like a slow, elegant hawk. Everything was going to plan, for now. Across the table, Denise clicked the cap of her pen. A small sound, almost nothing, but for those who knew, it was the signal. Christine wrapped the warm-up and gently shifted the spotlight. Denise cleared her throat just slightly and lifted her gaze. "You often speak about responsibility," she began, her voice calm, with a softness that didn't dilute the weight of the question. "In public life, in media, in institutions. So I'm curious, what responsibility do you feel you personally carry when speaking about the country that raised you?" There was a pause. Not long, but just long enough to register. The smile remained, but it faltered around the edges. "With visibility," he said, smoothly enough, "comes the duty to speak honestly about what's not working, about the harms that keep repeating because no one's willing to name them." "Harms," Denise repeated softly, like she was testing the temperature of the word. "Patterns." He gave a slight nod. She leaned back just a bit, voice still light. "Would you say shows like ours, British media, are part of those patterns?" This time the silence was measurable, fractional, but thick, a held breath, a subtle shift. "I make a distinction," he replied finally, "between journalism that tries to inform and content that's designed to provoke." "Provoke," Kay echoed, tilting her head slightly. Her tone was still friendly. "That's strong language." "Sometimes," he said, "it has to be." The temperature changed. Not a lot, but enough. That was when Nadia stepped in, gentle tone, practiced timing. "Many of our viewers deeply admire the work you've done around mental health, your service initiatives, and the awareness you've raised. But some of them also wrestle with this. How do you reconcile criticizing institutions while still holding titles granted by them? How do you think about that balance?" He nodded, and the mask returned, calm, poised, a statesman's nod. I think of service, not structure. He said, titles are historic, service is now. Denise smiled, not unkindly. That's a good line, she said. Service over structure. And then she let the quiet settle between them, just long enough for everyone to realize the interview had moved to a different terrain, and they weren't going back. The quiet didn't last long, but it lasted long enough. Harry's posture hadn't changed, but something behind his eyes had. Not fear, not discomfort exactly, but awareness. A sense that the conversation had stepped out of the warm, shallow waters of PR-safe territory and was now drifting into something less predictable. Christine picked up the rhythm again, trying to smooth the curve. Harry, you've spoken before about the power of storytelling, that your experience, your platform gives you a way to challenge harmful narratives. What kind of responsibility do you think the media has in shaping public understanding? That was safe ground, or at least supposed to be, but something in the phrasing seemed to spark something sharper in him. The media is one of the most powerful institutions in modern society, he said, voice steady but weightier now. It can shape empathy, or it can weaponize fear, and too often, it chooses the latter. That landed differently. In the control room, someone leaned closer to the monitor. On set, Kay made a note in the corner of her pad. Christine offered a quick smile, professionally unfazed, and passed the next cue toward Nadia. Your recent docuseries, there's been a lot of public reaction to it. Some praised it as necessary transparency. Others saw it as airing personal grievances. When you're putting that kind of content into the world, how do you separate personal truth from public impact? He shifted slightly in his seat, his fingers curling over the armrest for the first time. You can't separate them completely, he admitted, but transparency isn't grievance, and the reaction says more about the audience's discomfort than the speaker's intention. Denise spoke again, her voice softer now, but no less precise. You've said before that silence in some cases is complicity. Do you believe the royal family should have broken their silence about how the press treated you and your wife? Another silence. The kind that wasn't dead air, but a pulse. Even the audience picked up on it. The laughter and clapping that had once come easily had dried up. Everyone was listening now, really listening. I believe families, institutions, have choices, Harry said, to support, to intervene, or to protect the image instead. I think silence is a choice, one that protects power, not people. That was it. The shift had completed itself. The polite interview was gone. In its place was a slow, strategic conversation disguised as television. The panel didn't flinch. They were professionals. They'd been here before. Not in this exact space perhaps, but in the tension that came when a guest believed he was here to lead the dance, and then realized the floor was already moving beneath him. Kay leaned forward, pen tapping once against her notepad. Her voice had that casual clarity that often hides the sharpest questions. You say image is protected at the cost of people, but you've also done interviews, written books, signed deals, arguably creating a different image, one that you now control. Is that a new kind of power, or just a different version of the old one? The smile faltered again, just a millimeter, but enough. Transparency isn't control, he said, measured now. I'm not shaping image, I'm sharing experience. That's not the same thing. Denise raised an eyebrow. It wasn't skepticism exactly, more like a question mark drawn in the air. But every time you speak, she said gently, millions listen. Headlines follow. Conversations ripple. That is power. So how do you make sure you're using it in a way that doesn't just shift the target from you to someone else? For a moment, the studio was still. No laughter track, no background hum. Even the lights seemed quieter. He took a breath. Not shallow, not deep, just one of those breaths that carried weight. I speak to break patterns, he said, not to create new ones. That answer hung in the air. Not final, but definite. Christine glanced at the clock, subtly cueing the production team. The next segment loomed, pre-planned, lighter, easier, a chance to pivot, but pivoting now would feel false. Everyone knew it, so she didn't. Instead, she stayed present. You've stepped outside the system, but the system still defines how many people see you. Do you think it's possible to ever really leave it? A pause again, but this one, he chose. No, Harry said at last, you don't leave it. You just stop pretending it isn't affecting you. That was the moment. The audience didn't clap, not because they weren't moved, but because they weren't sure if this was still television or something else entirely. Nadia glanced at her cue cards, but didn't use them. Do you miss it? She asked quietly. The structure? The belonging? Even the protection? He looked over, his expression softer now. Some days, he said. Other days, I remember what it cost. That wasn't a headline. That was a scar speaking. There's a point in every interview where the performance either holds or begins to slip. This wasn't collapse. Not yet, but the shape of the conversation had changed. It no longer resembled a neatly packaged chat show segment. It felt more like a negotiation with silence. The kind of silence that waits to see whether you'll keep talking or retreat. Prince Harry didn't retreat, but the smooth edges of his media presence had started to roughen. Kay's pen hovered, but she didn't write. She looked directly at him, more listener than interviewer now. "Let me ask this," she said gently, "and I'll try to phrase it carefully. When you speak about your mental health, your trauma, the impact of the tabloids, and the pressure of family obligations, it resonates. People hear it, but there's also..." She hesitated, not for effect, for precision. "There's a tension," she continued, "between being the wounded and being the privileged, between being harmed by the institution and still representing it in some way. Do you feel that contradiction, or are we the ones making it?" It was a clean, fair question, but it struck something. Not anger, something more personal. Harry looked down for a second. When he looked back up, the usual polish was there, but thinner now, stretched. "I don't think pain is erased by privilege," he said, "and I don't think privilege excuses silence." Denise, who'd been quiet for a beat, broke in softly. "But don't you think pain and power shape how we listen to people? You've been given space to tell your story, yes, but not everyone who's gone through institutional harm gets that luxury. Is there a part of you that worries your voice might take up all the oxygen in the room?" That one landed, not like a blow, more like a reminder. He didn't deflect, he didn't double down. "That's something I sit with," he said, "often." And there it was again, no defensive pivot, no practiced zinger, just honesty. Unguarded, if only for a moment. Nadia picked it up with her usual grace. "I think a lot of people who followed your journey, and I mean genuinely followed, not just scrolled the headlines, have seen you wrestle with that. Public vulnerability is a strange thing. Some people weaponize it, others find refuge in it. How do you protect your story when the world keeps trying to reframe it?" Harry's mouth twitched, part smile, part grimace. "I stopped trying to protect the story," he said. "Now I try to protect the why behind it." Christine, watching closely, gave a small nod, and you could almost feel the shift again. The panel was no longer navigating a list of questions. They were in it now, responding, adapting, probing not to provoke, but to understand something real. And that realness was doing something unexpected. It was pushing Harry off script. He adjusted in his seat, exhaled lightly, then looked at Christine. "You know, before I came here today," he said, "I had a conversation with my team about how we'd keep this light, about what I would and wouldn't say." "And?" she asked, eyebrows raised just enough to prompt the obvious follow-up. "And I'm saying it anyway," he replied. Laughter this time, not scripted, not cued. The audience didn't roar. They chuckled, low, knowing, not mockery, recognition. Denise leaned back, watching him now, not like a guest, but like a person mid-crossroads. "Is that because you're tired of controlling the message?" she asked. "Or because you've realized the message controls itself?" He paused. That kind of question demands a pause. "I think I'm just tired," he said, "of all of it. The performance, the permission seeking, the idea that every truth needs to be pre-cleared before it can be spoken." There it was, not polished, not prepared, just spoken. Christine reached over, not literally, but with her tone. "You've been criticized. You've been defended. You've been picked apart by people who've never met you. What's something you think we still get wrong about you?" Harry didn't blink. "That I walked away from duty," he said, "when really I walked toward a different one." Kay nodded slowly. "And what does that duty look like now?" He answered without hesitation, "Making sure my children grow up in a world where they're not defined by someone else's narrative, where they don't have to heal from things I stayed silent about." For a moment, even the panel didn't respond. That line had weight. Then Nadia, gently again. "And is that possible?" Harry's response came quieter this time. "I don't know, but I believe it's worth trying for." Off camera, the floor manager motioned for time. Christine caught the signal, gave a near invisible nod. There were only a few minutes left. before they'd need to shift. The next segment was ready. A celebrity chef was waiting in the wings with a tray of prepped ingredients. Someone backstage held a bowl of chopped herbs like it might save the day, but no one wanted to leave this moment yet. So Christine didn't wrap it up, not yet. She offered him a final question instead, one with no correct answer, and that was the point. If you could say one thing to the version of yourself from 5 years ago, just before everything changed, what would it be? He looked down again, a longer pause this time, and when he looked back up, his voice was quiet but resolute. I'd tell him, you're gonna lose a lot, but you'll gain yourself. Silence. Not awkward, not broadcast silence. The real kind. And then, soft applause. Not prompted, not forced, just human. If you like this video, then subscribe.